What we're then able to do is start to score welfare. And I'll take you through how we do that. It's not just on activity, but once you're starting to see activity, distribution, and all the other factors, we can start to look at the 5 freedoms of any animal and start benchmarking what we're seeing in the shed. And this is a sheet that's giving me a live period for all 4 sheds, the welfare score out of 100. Now, I don't ever expect to get 100 for a long period of time, because the minute I put any animal in a shed, I'm going to compromise it. But what's really interesting about some of this is to start to say, well, if I'm at 96% achieving the welfare requirements, and I manipulate, say, the feeding ration, now I might introduce a bit of hunger, which might lose me 2 percentage points on welfare, but I might then improve activity levels, which will gain me 3% in welfare. So you can start to trade off and say, okay, I'm not always going to get an improvement, but maybe I'll get a bigger improvement than a decrease, and optimise these sheds as best we can. And would it ever eventually end up where you bought a chicken and it had to have a welfare score that had been scored by a computer? Because you can't really do it by a human, because if you've got a hangover, your interpretation of a smelly broiler shed might be a bit different to when you haven't got a hangover. So doing it by this way means it's impartial, it's 24 hours a day. And this is how we're getting these scores. So, you know, we've got at the top there, feed. We know the feeders are running, we're weighing the food, so they can't be hungry. They've got absence of thirst, we're monitoring the water. We know they're drinking consistently during the day, so they can't be thirsty. Then we can start to get to resting and start looking at how long their dark period was. And what sort of lighting level was it? How many dark periods in the day did they have? Thermal comfort. We're looking at temperature, humidity. We can start to look at CO2 if we want to introduce it. Ease of movement. We can do stocking density because we know how many are in there and we know what they weigh and we know how big the shed is. So we know the stocking density. We know the distribution and activity from the cameras. And then mortality, we tell the computers every day how many birds are dying. So we know the mortality. So actually, when you combine all of that together, it's quite a powerful set of data. But of course, you've got to try and then tell the computer what's good and what's not good. And that is a bit of a challenge. So what we've been trying to do is establish these parameters for my farm and my farm only. Because my birds generally grow a little bit faster, they're generally slightly more efficient, they're generally, you know, they are outperforming a number of other sheds, they are going to eat more because they're growing more. And similarly with water, if they're eating more, they're going to drink more, and vice versa. But the idea being, you know, I don't want to be down in the red. Down in the red means they're not eating and drinking enough. There must be an issue. Up in the green, and they should be okay. When you start getting things like temperature and humidity, you start setting parameters where you don't want it too high and you don't want it too low. So we then have to try and come up with this banding, and we're aiming for this dark green line. But then if you looked at the top one and the temperature, you can see my line at sort of day 3 drops down into the almost yellow very quickly. That's because I have underfloor heating. So my air temperature is 4 degrees lower than the standard because they're sat on a hot floor. So again, we have to start to manipulate these for every individual farm. And that's when data and data management starts to get challenging, because you've got to make the data relevant to your business such that you have faith in it to make some decisions. And if it's just done on a generic broad sweep, this is the answer, that's very, very difficult for you to embrace that. So there we've got some activity, and you can see, you know, birds get more active as they're growing initially, and then they're going to get less active as they get heavier. And mortality, you know, early on, we will go into the red because we will tend to cull out anything that is 50-50 in that first 7 days. The broiler sector does not earn enough pennies for me to take it to day 28 and then decide it's no good and cull it. I have to take it out early. And also, because they're growing so fast, I'm lifting feeders and drinkers. If I've got 1 or 2 in there that aren't very well, they'll soon not reach the feeders or drinkers, and they'll die almost of dehydration. So I'd far sooner cull it out early on. So we do tend to go in the red early on. But again, that could be manipulated for my farm.